The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that circled the peaceful world below. Inside, representatives from 40 different species gathered for their monthly meeting. The seats were filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed softly in the dim light. Chancellor Dravos stood at the center podium. His reptilian skin caught the light as he moved. He looked around the room and noticed something unusual. One seat remained empty. The human seat. "Where is Ambassador Taemin?" Dravos asked. His voice echoed through the chamber. A few council members laughed. "Probably running late again," someone said. "You know how humans are, always busy with something." Venik, the council secretary, clicked his mandibles together. He was an insectoid being with multiple eyes that moved independently. "I sent 3 messages to the human embassy this morning. No response." "Give them time," Dravos said, waving a clawed hand. "We'll start without them. They can catch up when they arrive." The meeting continued. They discussed trade agreements and border disputes. They talked about mining rights and cultural exchanges. An hour passed, then 2. The human seat remained empty. Finally, Venik stood up. His voice was worried. "Chancellor, I have troubling news. I've contacted every human facility in this sector. No one is answering." The chamber grew quiet. Biora, a tall being with silver skin and large eyes, leaned forward. "What do you mean, no one?" "I mean silence. Complete silence. The embassy, the human colonies on 3 nearby worlds, even their trading stations." "Nothing." Dravos frowned. "That's impossible. There are millions of humans in this sector alone." "I'm sending investigation teams now," Venik said. The council waited. The mood in the chamber changed from casual to tense. Messages came in slowly over the next few hours. Each one brought more confusion. The first team reported from Earth's nearest colony. "The city is empty. Lights are on, doors are open, but there's not a single human here. Their pets are wandering the streets. Food is still cooking in some homes, but the people are gone." Another message arrived from a human space station. "We've searched every level. The station is fully powered. Life support is working, but there are no humans. Their belongings are here. Their computers are running. They just vanished." More reports came in. Human trading ships floated empty in space. Human research facilities stood abandoned. On Earth itself, the investigation teams found cities full of everything except humans. Cars sat in traffic. Offices had coffee cups still warm on desks. But not a single human could be found anywhere. The council chamber erupted in noise. Everyone spoke at once. Some members looked frightened. Others seemed confused. Dravos held up his hand for silence. "This is unprecedented. An entire species doesn't just disappear." "Maybe they were taken," suggested a council member with blue fur. "By whom?" Biora asked. "And how could someone take billions of beings from hundreds of worlds without anyone noticing?" "Perhaps they left voluntarily," Venik said quietly. Several council members laughed at this. "Left? Where would they go? Why would they leave everything behind?" Dravos stood taller. "Whatever the reason, this presents us with an opportunity. The humans held significant territory. Their resources are now unclaimed. One proposed we divide their holdings among the council members." Biora stood up quickly. "Wait, we should understand what happened first. The humans weren't just territory holders. They ran critical systems across the galaxy, such as," Dravos asked with a dismissive tone, "such as the communication networks that let us talk to each other right now. Such as the medical facilities that treat diseases across 50 species. Such as the trade routes that connect our worlds." "We can handle those things," Dravos said. "The humans weren't special. They were just one species among many. Honestly, I think the council will function better without them. Several members nodded in agreement. One spoke up. The humans were always causing problems, too aggressive, too emotional, always pushing for changes. They were too loud, another added, always insisting their way was better. Bajara looked around the chamber with growing concern. You're all making a mistake. The humans did more than you realize. Then we'll learn to do it ourselves, Dravos said firmly. I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of absorbing human territories into council jurisdiction? Most hands, claws, and tentacles went up. Biora did not raise her hand. Neither did Venik. The motion passes, Dravos announced. Secretary Venik, please arrange for council teams to take over human facilities and systems. Venik nodded slowly, but his eyes showed worry. Over the next few days, council teams moved into human territories. They took over offices and facilities. They tried to access human computer systems. They attempted to understand the infrastructure humans had built. Problems started almost immediately. On the third day, a major communication hub went offline. It connected 12 different star systems. Council technicians couldn't get it working again. The human-designed system was too complex. On the fifth day, security systems at several stations failed. Pirates attacked a merchant convoy that had always been safe before. The human-designed protection protocols were no longer active, and no one knew how to restart them. On the seventh day, a medical facility lost access to its drug database. The database contained treatments for thousands of conditions across dozens of species. It was locked behind human encryption that no one could break. Venik stood before the council again. Chancellor, we're having difficulties with the systems humans maintained. Their technology is more integrated into our infrastructure than we thought. Then work harder, Dravos snapped. We're not helpless children. We built civilizations before humans ever reached space. But we built this current civilization with them, Boara said quietly, whether we want to admit it or not. In an abandoned office on Earth, investigators found personal logs. They belonged to a human diplomat named Hai Jin. She had worked in the Outer Rim territories. Her last entry was dated 2 weeks before the disappearance. The log read, "The Council continues to marginalize our contributions. They take credit for human innovations. They deny us equal voting rights. They restrict our expansion while allowing others to grow. I fear we're reaching a breaking point. If they cannot see us as partners, perhaps it's time we found another path." The investigator sent the log to the council. Most members dismissed it as one person's complaints. Behora read it 3 times, her expression growing darker each time. As the second week began, more systems failed. Trade routes became dangerous. Communication networks flickered in and out. Medical facilities struggled to help patients. And slowly, very slowly, the council began to understand that the silence of humanity was just the beginning of their problems. 3 weeks after the humans disappeared, the galaxy began to fall apart. It started small. A banking system here, a power grid there. But within days, the problem spread like a disease across every system and station. The council held emergency meetings every day, sometimes twice a day. The chamber that had once been filled with casual confidence now buzzed with panic. 73%, Venik said, his voice barely audible. That's how much of our computer infrastructure was maintained by humans. Not owned by them, maintained. They wrote the code that makes different systems talk to each other. They created the bridges between our technologies. Chancellor Dravos stared at the data on his screen. That can't be right. We built these systems. No, Biora said coldly. We built our individual systems. Humans made them work together. There's a difference. A council technician projected a massive diagram onto the main screen. It showed the galaxy's computer networks as a web of connections. 90% of the connecting lines were marked in red. These are failing. the technician explained. Every red line represents a human-designed integration protocol. We don't have the expertise to maintain them. We barely understand how they work. What about the humans who worked for private companies? Someone asked. Surely they left instructions? Enoch pulled up another file. This is from engineer Young-ho. He worked for the Stellar Communications Corporation. His final report, submitted 1 month before the disappearance, warned that the entire galactic network was built on human innovations. He requested funding to train other species to understand the systems. His request was denied. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to remember that decision now. The crisis deepened. On the planet Minora Prime, a peaceful world of farmers and artists, alarms began blaring. Long-range sensors detected ships approaching. Warships. They belonged to the Verlix Empire. The Verlix were conquerors. For 50 years, they had tested the Council's borders, looking for weakness. For 50 years, humans had stopped them. Human military advisors had designed defense strategies. Human diplomats had negotiated peace treaties. Human ships had patrolled the borders. Now, there were no humans. And the Verlix saw their chance. The attack was swift and brutal. Minuran cities burned. The Council scrambled to send help, but their response was chaotic. Fleet commanders couldn't coordinate their movements. The unified command structure had been designed by humans, and without them, it fell apart. Admiral Hyon Sik had been the chief military strategist for the Council's defense forces. He had spent 20 years building contingency plans for every possible threat. All of those plans were locked in encrypted databases. The Council's best code breakers worked day and night to access them, but the encryption was too sophisticated. It was human encryption, layers upon layers of it, and no one could crack it. 3 Minuran cities fell in the first week, 2 more in the second. The death toll climbed into the hundreds of thousands. Bo-Ra stood before the Council, her silver skin now dull with exhaustion. This is what happens when you dismiss an entire species as aggressive and too emotional. Those aggressive humans were the ones protecting us. Those emotional humans were the ones who cared enough to stand between us and our enemies. We'll develop new strategies, Dravos insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. With what time? Beth-Ora snapped. The Verlix won't wait for us to learn what we should have valued before. The economic situation grew worse. The galactic credit, humanity's currency, had become the standard for all trade. It was stable, secure, and accepted everywhere. Humans had designed the algorithms that kept it stable, adjusting for inflation and economic shifts across thousands of worlds. Without humans, those algorithms stopped working. The credit's value began to swing wildly. One day, it was worth twice its previous value. The next day, half. Merchants couldn't price their goods. Banks couldn't calculate interest. The entire economic system shuddered and groaned. Economist Sonny had written papers about this exact scenario. She had warned the Council 5 years ago that the economy was too dependent on human oversight. She had proposed training programs and backup systems. The Council had called her pessimistic and fear-mongering. Her proposals were filed away and forgotten. Now, those papers were being read urgently by every economic minister in the galaxy. But reading about a problem wasn't the same as fixing it. Markets crashed. Businesses closed. Unemployment spread across the Council worlds. Then came the plague. It started on Outpost 7, a mining station in the frontier territories. Workers began falling ill with a respiratory disease. Within days, it had spread to 3 nearby planets. Within 2 weeks, thousands were sick. The Council's medical teams recognized the disease immediately. It had appeared before, 20 years ago, and had been defeated by a human doctor named Myung. She had developed a treatment that had saved millions of lives. The medical teams rushed to find her research notes. They found files, but they were incomplete. Dr. Mi-young had requested funding to create a comprehensive medical database and to train other species in human medical techniques. Like Young-ho, like Sun-hee, she had been denied. The council had seen no need to invest in such things. Now, with the plague spreading, the medical teams tried to recreate her work. They failed. Human medicine wasn't just about formulas and procedures. It was about intuition, about seeing connections that others missed, about creative problem-solving that couldn't be easily taught. The death toll from the plague climbed. First hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Quarantines were established, but they barely slowed the spread. Parents watched their children die. Doctors stood helpless beside their patients. And everyone knew that Dr. Mi-young could have stopped this in days. But Dr. Mi-young was gone. In the council chamber, accusations flew like weapons. The mining consortium blamed the medical corps. The medical corps blamed the economic ministers for not funding research. The military blamed the diplomats for failing to prevent the Verlix War. Everyone blamed everyone, and nothing got better. Venick compiled a report. It listed every critical system in the galaxy and its status. Communications, failing. Security, compromised. Medicine, in crisis. Economy, collapsing. Military coordination, non-existent. The list went on for pages. We thought humans were just one species among many, Venick said as he presented the report. We were wrong. They weren't the strongest or the smartest. They weren't the oldest or the most advanced. But they were the glue. They connected us. They made our civilization work. Past tense? Someone asked quietly. Yes, Venick said. Past tense. Because that civilization is dying. On a human colony world, now empty and silent, investigators found a school. In one classroom, drawings still hung on the walls. Children from different species had drawn pictures together, showing humans playing with them, learning with them, laughing with them. One drawing showed a human teacher named Yoonji standing in the middle of a circle of alien children. The caption, written in a child's shaky handwriting, said, Miss Yoonji teaches us that different is beautiful. The investigator sat in the empty classroom for a long time, looking at the drawings. Outside, the colony was silent except for the wind. Inside, the drawings seemed to ask a question that no one wanted to answer. What had they done? 2 months after the disappearance, an archaeologist named Krev made a discovery on Earth. He had been searching through abandoned human homes, trying to understand what had happened. In a small apartment in a city called Seoul, he found a personal computer that was still running. The computer belonged to someone named Dong Hyan. He had been a researcher, studying ancient civilizations. His personal journal was open on the screen. The last entry dated just 3 days before all humans vanished. Krev read it carefully. Then he read it again. His hands shook as he transmitted the file to the council. The journal was long, covering 5 years of Dong Hyan's life. It wasn't written for anyone else to read. It was just one human's private thoughts. But those thoughts revealed a truth that the council had been avoiding. Dong Hyan wrote about his work. He had discovered a new method for dating archaeological sites, a breakthrough that would change how scientists studied the past. He had presented his findings to the council's science division. They had thanked him, filed his report, and then published the same method 6 months later under a different scientist's name. Dong Han's name wasn't mentioned. He wrote about his friend, a human engineer who had designed a more efficient engine for space travel. The design had been adapted by a council corporation. Adapted meant stolen. The corporation made billions. The engineer got nothing. He wrote about his sister, who had applied for a promotion 12 times over 8 years. Each time, she was passed over for less qualified candidates. The reason was never stated directly, but everyone knew. She was human. The council preferred to promote their own species. He wrote about human colonies that had requested resources to expand. The requests were denied, while other species received approval for similar projects. He wrote about council meetings where human representatives were talked over. Ignored or dismissed, the entries went on and on. Small injustices, daily humiliations, systematic discrimination. Individually, they seemed minor. Together, they painted a picture of a species that had given everything and received only tolerance in return. The final entry was different. It was shorter, but every word burned with quiet anger. The vote happened today. The council thinks we don't know, but we have friends who told us. They voted to limit human expansion. They voted to reduce our representation. They voted to make us second-class citizens officially, when we've been treated that way unofficially for decades. We built their communication networks. We saved their species from diseases. We stopped their wars. We connected their worlds. And this is how they repay us. We're done. Tae Min is meeting with the others tonight. We're leaving. All of us. Let them see what the galaxy looks like without humans to hold it together. Chancellor Dravos read the journal in his private chambers. He read it 3 times, and with each reading, his certainty crumbled. The humans hadn't been taken. They hadn't mysteriously vanished. They had left. They had chosen to leave. And they had every reason to do so. He called an emergency council session. The chamber was less full than usual. Some members were dealing with crises on their home worlds. Others had resigned in disgrace as their failures mounted. I've read Dong Hyen's journal, Dravos said. His voice was tired. I imagine you all have too. We need to acknowledge the truth. The humans left because of us. Because of how we treated them. One person's complaints don't represent an entire species. Someone protested weakly. Biora stood up. She looked around the chamber with disgust. Don't they? We found similar journals in human homes across the galaxy. Teachers, doctors, engineers, artists. All of them writing about the same things. All of them feeling the same way. This wasn't one person complaining. This was billions of people reaching the same conclusion. We failed them. The council tried to salvage what remained. They assigned teams to learn human technology. Those teams discovered something that made everything worse. Human innovations weren't just advanced. They were fundamentally different from how other species thought. A programmer studied human code left behind on a server. The code was elegant, efficient, and completely incomprehensible. It worked perfectly, but no one could understand why. The programmer had been trained in the finest schools. He had decades of experience. But looking at human code was like looking at art, created by a mind that thought in ways he couldn't follow. The code had been written by someone named Jin Woo. Colleagues described his work as beautiful. He could solve problems in a few lines of code that would take others hundreds of lines. He could see patterns where others saw chaos. He had a fear. To teach others his methods. No one had taken him seriously. Programming was programming. They had thought. How different could human methods be? Now they knew. Very different. And without humans to maintain the code, to update it, to fix it when it broke, the systems were dying. One by one, critical programs failed, and no one could repair them. The Verlix War continued to go badly. Without human military strategy, the Council forces were reactive instead of proactive. They responded to Verlix attacks instead of anticipating them. They lost battles they should have won. They suffered casualties that could have been avoided. Casualty reports arrived daily. Tens of thousands dead. Then hundreds of thousands. The Minoran civilization, which had existed for 3,000 years, was on the verge of extinction. In the council chamber, Ray held up a datapad. This is a casualty list from yesterday's battle. 5,000 dead. Do you want to know what makes me angriest? It's not just that they died. It's that they died unnecessarily. Admiral Hyacinth had a defensive plan for this exact scenario. It's sitting in his encrypted files, and we can't access it. 5,000 beings died because we can't open a file. We're working on the encryption, Dravos said. For 2 months you've been working on it. How much longer? How many more have to die? No one had an answer. The Council's best cryptographers said the encryption could take years to break. Maybe decades. Maybe never. Human computer science was that far ahead. Social unrest spread across Council worlds. Citizens who had been friends with humans organized protests. They demanded to know why their friends had left. They demanded accountability from the Council. Some protests turned violent. On the world of Talax, a memorial appeared overnight. It was unauthorized, built without permits or permission. But the local government didn't dare remove it. Thousands of citizens came every day to leave flowers and notes. The memorial was simple. A stone pillar with names carved into it. Human names. Below the names, a message. They were our friends. They were our teachers. They were our healers. They asked only to be treated as equals. We failed them. We're sorry. Similar memorials appeared on other worlds. The Council couldn't stop them. The people were mourning, and you couldn't legislate away grief. Teacher Yunji had run cultural exchange programs for 15 years. She had brought children from different species together, teaching them to appreciate each other's differences. Her former students, now adults, organized a vigil. 10,000 people attended, holding lights in the darkness, singing songs that Yunji had taught them years ago. One former student spoke to the crowd. Miss Yunji taught us that we're stronger together. She taught us that every species has value. She taught us to look for the best in each other. I wish the Council had learned the same lessons. The vigil was broadcast across the galaxy. Millions watched. Many cried. The Council watched too, and some of them finally understood. They hadn't just lost a species. They had lost friends. They had lost teachers. They had lost people who had genuinely cared about making the Sing galaxy better. And those people weren't coming back. 3 months after the humans left, the Council authorized a massive search operation. They sent ships to every corner of known space. They scanned planets, moons, asteroids, and deep space. They searched for any sign of where humanity had gone. The search teams found something unexpected. Hidden facilities that humans had built in secret. Construction sites in remote asteroid fields. Underground complexes on uninhabited moons. Warehouses filled with supplies that had been slowly stockpiled over years, in a facility orbiting a red dwarf star. Investigators found ship construction bays. The bays were enormous, large enough to build vessels the size of cities. And they were empty. Whatever had been built, that was long gone. Commander Rillick led the investigation team. He was a veteran officer, experienced and thorough. He searched through the facility's computers, looking for clues. Most files had been wiped, but he found fragments. Design specifications. Resource manifests. Construction schedules. The humans had been building generation ships. Hundreds of them. Ships designed to travel for decades, maybe centuries. Ships that could sustain entire populations. The project had a name, buried deep in a corrupted file, Project Exodus. Rillick found one more thing. A log entry from someone named Sung Min. He had been a ship captain, assigned to coordinate the Exodus. His log was brief. Final preparations complete. All ships ready. The Council thinks we don't plan ahead, that we're too impulsive. They'll learn differently. We've been planning this for 20 years. 20 years of building in secret. 20 years of preparing for the day they went too far. That day has come. Tomorrow, we leave. We take nothing that belongs to them. We leave everything we built for them. Maybe they'll appreciate it when it's gone. Maybe they won't. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. The log was dated 1 day before the disappearance. Relek transmitted his findings to the council. The response was mixed. Some members felt betrayed. They planned this for 20 years? They were conspiring against us? Biora laughed bitterly. Conspiring? They were preparing an escape route. There's a difference. If you live in a house with a terrible landlord, you don't burn down the house. You find somewhere else to live. That's what they did. The search continued, but finding where the humans had gone seemed impossible. They had vanished completely, taking their ships and their secrets with them. Then the messages began. 3 months and 1 day after the disappearance, a broadcast activated on Earth. It played on every communication channel, impossible to ignore or shut down. The message was a video. A man appeared on screen. He looked tired but determined. He sat in a simple room with blank walls. "My name is Young-Ho," he said. "I was an engineer. I maintained the communication networks that you're using to watch this message. I spent 30 years making sure you could talk to each other. I fixed problems you never knew existed. I updated systems while you slept. And when I asked for funding to train others to do this work, I was told it wasn't necessary. You thought the systems just ran themselves. You were wrong." The message ended. The next day, another message activated. This one showed a woman in a medical facility. "My name is Myung. I'm a doctor. I developed treatments for diseases that killed millions of your people. I shared my research freely because I believed in helping others. I asked for funding to create training programs so others could continue my work. I was denied. You took my cures but didn't value the person who created them. Now thousands are dying from a plague I could have stopped. I'm sorry for them. I'm not sorry I left." Every day, a new message appeared. They came from ordinary humans, not leaders or ambassadors. A teacher, a pilot, a farmer, a programmer. Each one told their story. Each one explained why they had left. A merchant named Subin described how her trading routes had connected 12 different species, enabling commerce that had made everyone richer. She had been audited 7 times in 1 year, while other merchants were never audited once. "You didn't trust us," she said. "You benefited from our work, but never trusted us. We got tired of proving ourselves over and over." A scientist named Jaiho had discovered a new energy source that could have powered cities for centuries. He had presented it to the Council's Energy Committee. They had rejected it, saying more research was needed. A year later, another species presented the same discovery, using Jaiho's stolen notes. They were praised as geniuses. "You stole from us," Jaiho said in his message. "And then you wondered why we stopped sharing." The messages kept coming. They were programmed to activate 1 per day, playing across the entire galaxy. The Council couldn't stop them. The technology was too sophisticated, built into systems so deep that shutting them down would collapse what remained of the infrastructure. People across the galaxy watched the messages. Many wept. Others got angry at the Council. Some started questioning everything they thought they knew. Then came the final message. 4 months after the disappearance, a special broadcast activated. It was longer than the others, and it came from someone everyone recognized. Ambassador Tae-min appeared on screen. He looked older than his official photos, gray-haired and weary. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was steady. "I served on the Council for 37 years, he began. I believed in what the Council represented: unity, cooperation, peace, I watched humans contribute to that vision every single day. Let me tell you what we did, because I don't think you ever really noticed. He pulled up a screen beside him. Data began scrolling. We prevented 14 wars through diplomatic efforts. We created the translation matrix that lets all of you speak to each other. We developed the medical techniques that extended average lifespans by 40% across the galaxy. We built 80% of the infrastructure you use every day. We did this not for profit, not for power, but because we believed we were building something together. His expression hardened. But you never saw us as partners. You saw us as useful tools. We were good enough to do the work, but not good enough to be treated as equals. You took credit for our innovations. You denied us equal representation. You limited our growth while allowing others to expand. You voted in secret to make us second-class citizens. Tae-min paused. We didn't leave out of anger, though we had every right to be angry. We left out of disappointment. We came to the stars hoping to find friends. We found employers instead. Employers who didn't appreciate their workers and didn't pay them fairly. He stood up. You'll survive without us. You'll rebuild. It will take decades, maybe centuries, but you'll manage. And maybe, in that rebuilding, you'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn to value those who are different from you. Maybe you'll learn that contribution matters more than appearance. Maybe you'll learn that saying you value someone and actually valuing them are two different things. Tae-min looked directly at the camera. We're not coming back. We've found a new home, far from here. We'll build a new civilization, one where everyone is truly equal. We wish you well. We hope you grow, but we won't be there to see it. Goodbye. The message ended. Silence filled the galaxy. The council sat in their chamber, stunned. Outside, across hundreds of worlds, people stood motionless, processing what they had heard. One question echoed everywhere. How had humanity hidden an exodus of billions? How had they moved entire populations without anyone noticing? The answer came from one final discovery. In a lab on Earth, investigators found experimental equipment. It was a portal technology, far beyond anything the Council had ever seen. Humans had developed it in secret, tested it in secret, and used it in secret. They had stepped through portals to their new home. They had taken everything living, left everything else. It had been coordinated, precise, and complete. One day they were there. The next day they were gone. The Council had called humans impulsive and emotional. But this exodus had required planning, discipline, and patience beyond anything the Council had imagined. They had underestimated humanity completely. And now they would live with that mistake forever. 10 years had passed since the last human left the galaxy. The Council still existed, but it was a shadow of what it had been. The Grand Chamber where representatives once debated with confidence now felt empty, even when full. The optimism that had defined the galactic community was gone, replaced by a cautious survival mentality. Bora was Chancellor now. Dravos had resigned 5 years ago, broken by guilt and failure. She stood at her window, looking out at the space station that orbited below. It had been built by humans a century ago. Parts of it still worked. Parts of it would never work again. The galaxy had stabilized, but at a cost. Technology had regressed significantly. The elegant systems humans had designed were too complex to maintain, so they had been replaced with simpler, less efficient alternatives. Communication was slower. Travel took longer. Medicine was less effective. The Verlix War had finally ended after 8 terrible years. The Council had won, but barely. Millions had died. Entire species had been reduced to small populations. The Verlix themselves had been pushed back to their original territories, but the victory felt hollow. Everyone knew that with human strategy, the war would have lasted months. Not years. Bo Ra visited a military cemetery once a month. Rows of markers stretched to the horizon, each one representing someone who had died in the war. She knew that most of them would still be alive if humans had been there to help. That knowledge was a weight she carried every day. The economic recovery had been slow. The galactic credit was gone, replaced by a patchwork of regional currencies that made trade complicated. Markets had recovered somewhat, but the efficiency and prosperity of the human era seemed like a distant dream now. Economist Sun He's warnings had been proven right, but being right brought no comfort to the billions who had suffered through the economic collapse. New leadership had implemented changes. Real changes. Species were now guaranteed equal representation. Discrimination was punishable by removal from office. Credit for innovations was carefully tracked and enforced. It was everything humans had asked for, delivered 10 years too late. Bo Ray had established an annual observance called Human Memorial Day. On that day, every world in the Council held ceremonies to remember what had been lost. Schools taught about human contributions. Museums displayed human achievements. It was a day of reflection and regret. She attended a ceremony at the largest museum on the Council home world. The museum had an entire wing dedicated to human history. Displays showed human inventions, human art, human philosophy. Children walked through the exhibits with wide eyes, learning about the species that had shaped their civilization. One display showed the translation matrix. A plaque explained, before humans, species could not easily communicate with each other. Humans created this system to let everyone talk to everyone else. They gave it to the galaxy freely, asking nothing in return. Another display showed medical breakthroughs. Images of Dr. Myung stood beside descriptions of the lives she had saved. A visitor stood there, reading silently. Her child had died in the plague that followed the human departure. She came to this display every Memorial Day. Bo Ra watched young people study the exhibits. They had grown up in a galaxy without humans. To them, humans were almost mythical. The species that had connected worlds. The species that had solved impossible problems. The species that had left in universities across the galaxy. Humans had become a major field of study. Scholars analyzed human texts, trying to understand how they thought. Programmers studied human code, attempting to recreate their methods. Philosophers debated what had made humans unique. Some said it was their diversity. Humans had come in many colors, spoke many languages, held many beliefs. That internal diversity had made them adaptable and creative. Others said it was their emotional depth. Humans felt things intensely, which drove them to create, to explore, to help others. Their emotions weren't a weakness, as the old council had believed. They were a strength. Still others focused on human resilience. Humans had faced terrible challenges in their own history. Wars, diseases, environmental catastrophes. They had survived all of it and learned from it. That experience had given them a perspective that other species lacked. A new philosophy had emerged from the study of humanity. It was called the Way of Connection, and it was based on human teachings. The core principle was simple. Different species are stronger together than apart, but only if they truly respect each other's worth. Temples dedicated to this philosophy existed on most major worlds. But Jiol-Ra visited one sometimes, sitting in the quiet, contemplating what could have been. The search for humanity continued, though it had become more symbolic than practical. Search ships still ventured into unexplored space, scanning for signs of human civilization. They never found anything. Wherever humans had gone, they had gone far and covered their tracks perfectly. Some people believed humans had transcended physical reality, becoming beings of pure energy. Others thought they had found another galaxy entirely, light years beyond reach. A few optimists hoped that one day humans would return. Bo Ra didn't believe they would return. Why would they? The galaxy that had dismissed them was gone. The council they had served had failed them. If they were thriving somewhere else, they had no reason to come back to a place that had treated them so poorly. On Earth's moon, the council had erected a monument 10 years ago. Bay-O-Ra had overseen its construction personally. She visited it once a year, making the long journey to humanity's birth system. The monument was a simple stone pillar, 15 meters tall. On it were carved words in every galactic language. The inscription had been debated for months. What could they say that would adequately express their regret? What words could capture the magnitude of their mistake? In the end, they settled on honesty. The inscription read, "Humanity lived here. We reached for the stars in hope. We left in sorrow. Remember not what we did, but what we could have done together." Bu-O-Ra stood before the monument, as she did every year. Earth stretched out below, blue and green and beautiful. Empty cities dotted the planet's surface. Nature was slowly reclaiming them. In a few more decades, the evidence of human civilization would be mostly gone, swallowed by forests and oceans. "I'm sorry," she said quietly to the empty world. "I wish I had done more. I wish I had fought harder for you. I wish the council had listened." The wind was her only answer. Earth had no humans left to hear her apology. The planet that had given birth to an extraordinary species was now just another abandoned world. Back on the council station, Badair prepared for another meeting. They would discuss trade agreements and territorial disputes, the everyday business of galactic governance. The council functioned, but it would never again achieve the heights it had reached with human participation in schools across the galaxy. Children learned a new lesson. It was taught in history classes, ethics classes, and social studies. The lesson was simple but profound. Value people while they're with you, not after they're gone. Respect contribution, not appearance. Treat everyone as equals, not just in words but in actions. Some species had learned this lesson. Others were still learning. Progress was slow, but it was real in a distant part of the universe. Far beyond any council censor's reach, a human colony celebrated its 10th anniversary. The colony had grown from the initial exodus population of several billion to something even larger. Children born here had never seen the old galaxy. This was their home.